Hello everyone, welcome back to Pommy and Oz. I hope we're all doing really well. If you are new around here, please drop a like, please drop a subscribe. It does mean the world to me and it really does help the channel out. We're nearly at 1,050, which is absolutely phenomenal. So I can't thank you enough for the love and support. So today what we're going to do is we're going to look at something that is probably a much talked about stat, but not many people really look into it that much, and I personally think it's one of the most incredibly important stats in the AFL, particularly to Carlton Football Club. So we're talking today about Under Pressure. Thank you, Mr. Mercury. And we're talking, yes, as Freddie says, we're talking about pressure. So what we've done is, we all know that I love to fiddle with stats and get a little bit of ins and outs. So what I've done is I've correlated all the pressure indicators. That's pressure acts, that's tackles, that's tackle conversion rates, and created a score for the sides and rated them 1 to 18. 1 being the most prolific team, 18th mean you're probably as weak as bread. So let's get into it. So what we've done is we've separated them. So we've got the back line, which is obviously your key defenders, your general defenders, your small defenders, rah-de-rah-de-rah. You've got your midfield, that's your on-ballers, your wings, your rucks as well. We're counting them as a midfield line. And we're going with the forward, the final third of the ground. Your key forwards, your small forwards, rah-de-rah-de-rah. So let's have a look. Now there's one indicator here that is very obvious, and that is Richmond Football Club. And it's no surprise, it shouldn't be, that Richmond Football Club are the best side defensive-wise. You'll see them feature a lot. Their game plan is entirely built on pressure. And the reason for that is they're skilled in their ability to force turnover. We saw it with the Doggies the other week against them, that when that pressure is applied, they're very tough to beat. And they starve sides, particularly the Doggies, who like to get the ball into the uncontested part of the game and really spread it. They're very good at closing down space, particularly when you look at the pressure acts. The pressure acts are very high. And if you look at Richmond's pressure acts, just in the back line alone, it actually works out at the average across the board 11.3 each, which is absolutely phenomenal when you think the average key defender will probably average around the 7 to 8 mark. Few of them get double figures. There is them out there, key defenders, that do get that, but genuinely they're not known for that. You actually find that Richmond really do enact pressure in the forward line. And it makes sense, because nowadays everyone talks about pressure starts in your forward line. If they can implement pressure, they can withstand even the most turmoil forward line. And it's okay that they haven't been that brilliant this year. I think that's more down to other factors at play. But one thing that holds up is their game plan is very consistent. And in my opinion, if you actually look at Richmond Tigers, they are by far and above, probably, in my opinion, the most proficient game plan. It's a very good game plan. It's the closest our AFL has got to, say, the Jurgen Klopp press that you see. It's very high pressure based, and for me it's probably the benchmark of what sides could. Now if you look at my team Carlton, you see we finished 7th in the back line, and that's no surprise. Now I think that's part of the problem, that we do struggle, and you'll see that there's going to be a pattern emerging in the next two stats we show, that the defence is really overworked. These pressure numbers, I think, as opposed to Port and Richmond, who their pressure numbers are high because that's what they do. You look, there's a few teams there, Collingwood, Gold Coast and us, even St Kilda, that I think the pressure numbers are slightly higher than the ladder positions for one reason, and that is they are under the cosh. And you'll see that that is becoming a simile in the next slide. So if we look at the midfield, might be a surprise this for some, but Adelaide Crows are actually the top-ranked pressure-based midfield. Now, they were at bottom of the backline stat that we just showed. And their midfield is really, really strong. They really do. When you look at his side, they really build everything around that midfield. It's hard to escape from. It's very tempestuous. They take away the outlet ball and the corridor ball very well. They defend that really well. And that has been shown this year in their results. Adelaide amass a staggering 17.5 pressure acts alone from the midfield on average, which is obscenely high. And it's a real credit to their system. They've got a very young midfield with some experience in there. They run hard both ways. If you actually look at the Adelaide side, particularly distance covered, all of them run both ways. Now, when we go to my beloved Carlton, we can remember that Collingwood were 4th and Carlton were 7th in backline pressure, 14th and 15th and 15th and 16th here. And there you are. There's a story. Our midfield doesn't really enact the pressure. It's very easy to slip through Carlton's midfield. And we only average 14.8, which is... It's tough to see. And what you see with Carlton is the way that they play is it needs pressure. You look, we're kind of a horrible hybrid, I think. We're somewhere between what Richmond do, and that's go quickly, to we've got this other game style which is very myriad of, I would say, the West Coast Eagles, and that is, you know, slow, controlled footy. And the problem is we can't do that, because what happens is, as the pressure builds, when we go slower, you find that players become static, they become very stagnant. And you look at Adelaide, Richmond and Brisbane, the top three sides in the comp, and pressure in the midfield, it's very active. It's very active. It's very, something's always happening. And I implore you to go and see your Dogs, your Melbournes, your Brisbanes, your Richmonds, your Adelaides, the top five sides. Look at how quickly they work. They work really hard and really in it together. They tackle in pairs. They're running in pairs. Now you look at Carlton, 15th, and you find what breaks Carlton down is the chip kick game. So you saw that with the Doggies, you saw it with Brisbane, you saw it with Port, and you saw it with Essendon to an extent, that when you chip kick it around and you really look to try and enact some kind of pressure on it, it falls apart. And it's very interesting, I think. It's really interesting that we rank so low for midfield pressure. Because I think midfield pressure, people talk about forward pressure, talk about backline pressure. They're really good. But you think the ball spends the majority of the time in a contested area, which is the middle quadrant of the ground, the middle third, if you will. And if you're not really implementing that, you see some teams there that are playing really poor football. Collingwood, St Kilda, GWS, Geelong, teams that are hot and cold. And it's no surprise that you look at their pressure acts when they win, they're top 8, but it's that low percentile. And you look at Carlton, I would say it's even more unforgivable for us, because we've got players that have high pressure numbers. You've got Ed Kerno, you've got Cripps, you've got Sam Walsh there. And it's interesting because I think that says to me that our makeup of the side is wrong. And I think that that's probably a reason that you saw Will Setterfield deployed more in a wing role, because I think Teague knows that, or whoever structurally is setting Carlton up knows that, and it doesn't quite work without it. And I think when you look at players to come back, that can get better, but it's a real application, and it's a real question mark, because you see Carlton, if you take the best 2 quarters of Carlton for these pressure stats this year, they'd be top 8. And there's a huge dissension with Carlton from their best to their worst. And there's a lot of reasons for that you can, it's all conjecture really, we don't know. But I would say that a big part of that is a resignation if they know what happened. And it's a culmination. You look at the backline makes mistakes because the midfield doesn't actively put enough pressure on. They're under the cosh really from start to finish. And if you go back to the Doggies game, and you go back to that, and you go back to the Essendon game, we're under the cosh for large periods, and then eventually the midfield gets on top. But the difference between the Doggies and the Essendon is when the pressure came, it was almost too late. They were tired. Where we kind of gained ascendancy against Essendon earlier on in the game, it gave them that break. And I think it's a real interesting thing. This is something that I think if Carlton could get in the top 10 even, you see North Melbourne there. It's very interesting because there's a pattern emerging with the ladder. And if we go to the final slide, this is the forward line. Now, you saw North there. They're mid-table for everything else. Forward line, it's very easy to defend against. And you find a lot of sides in this comp. Richmond, your Doggies, your Saints, Essendon, Melbourne, Eagles, and the Cats. This is probably, I would say, one of the most important stats if you want to score. If you want to enact forward pressure. These two are heavily linked because these sides that do it are traditionally very good. You see there's some sides there that are probably surprise you. I was surprised Brisbane was so low. But they score free flow goals. You look at their conversion, they're pretty efficient, getting the ball in, getting out and scoring. Now Carlton are 16th. And I think here, if you listen to Teague's words, and if you're one of them fans that listens and laps up what the club will say all the time, it's an interesting one this, because because Carlton, they have said their game plan, no one knows what the Carlton way is. It's one of the biggest kept secrets in the world. It's like trying to find, the Rosetta Stone again. It's like trying to find the Spear of Destiny. You've heard about it, but no one's seen the Spear of Destiny, but it's out there. Now, I think it's important that we look that we're 16th, we're bottom 3, only Gold Coast and North are worse than us. Surprisingly, Hawthorn, they're the 15th side, and again, a side that's traditionally their successful years, they built it on forward pressure. We're 16th, and what that says is for all the hard work, and you look at Carlton's inside 50 count, it's actually staggeringly quite high. We're one of the sides that, really does like to get the ball into inside 50 as quickly as possible, really. And you look at this, and I think there's a big issue for Carlton. There is a very big issue for our side, really as a whole. Because as hard as we try to get the ball inside 50, it comes out. And a lot of these sides, you look around in the AFL, we're the 8th most successful side at getting the ball inside 50. Most of these sides transition very well, particularly the top 8. Particularly your Richmond, particularly your West Coast. The Demons have done it really well. The Eagles are very proficient at it. Port, another side as well that we came on stock. If you're not keeping it in there, you're allowing them to rest. And if you're allowing them to rest and not under much pressure, they can build from the back very efficiently. And I think it's really interesting that you look at Carlton against Richmond, and I'd say Richmond's forward pressure, I don't think anyone in the world would argue how good Richmond's forward pressure is. 14.6, just their pressure acts alone. You're looking, they have 31.1 on average pressure indicators per player that's played in the forward line this year, versus Carlton's 10.6 and 17.8. That is a huge difference. That is astronomically different, and that is something that we've got to look at. Now, you look at the makeup of the side, there is players there that can jettison this side based on their VFL, and then using a very loose algorithm to see the average differential between a VFL footballer and an AFL footballer that could actually jettison us into the top 10. And the two of them players are Honey and Mr. Durden. And you bring them in, Durden's a tackle machine in the forward line. It does increase it. Another guy there you've got as well is Jack Martin. He's got decent pressure numbers, decent pressure indicators. But at the moment what you're seeing is that it's very easy to extract the ball from Carlton in an attacking set. And if you look at David Teague and how he does, he commits a lot of men forward. When we're genuinely peppering that, you see Jacob Wearing's probably the deepest player. And quite often he's about 70 metres out. He gets a lot of them intercepts in that area, almost just forward of halfway. And I think that there's the problem, because if you're very quick, you saw it with the Doggies, a very handball heavy game, a very fast game style, that spells trouble, because when you're on the front foot, you're only one exit away from rebound 50s from conceding a goal. And people always say to me, Dan, we seem to put pressure on and then bang, they go and score a goal. That is partly from the way that we attack, but also the fact that our forward line has a huge inability to allow the ball to be locked in. And I think it's very interesting. I think these numbers hopefully give you an indication of where I think one of the largest problems are. Now, is that fixable? It's fixable with structure, and it's fixable with the right personnel. And I think it explains why we've tried some weird things this year. We've tried Ed Kerno in the forward line, we tried Ed Kerno on the wing, we tried Setterfield on the wing, much to the chagrin of fans. But you see why, because it's a glaring issue. But there is players there in the VFL. It's whether the club, I think, bites the bullet and rolls the dice. You look there, Sydney ranking 4th and ranking 3rd, backline pressure ranking 11th in midfield, ranking 10th in the forward line. They've gone very young. Adelaide 11th, 1st and 18th in backline pressure. They've tried to do something. And I think it's going to be very interesting in the next couple of weeks what the club do, because I think if they suddenly lose to Melbourne, and heaven forbid they lose to Hawthorn, you're kind of going to have to look at these numbers, this raw data, and say it's prohibiting us. Because I look at Teague's game plan and I agree with him. It's very pressure based, because pressure allows the boys to play the game that they want. And that's why I think there's this illusion that under pressure we fold. It's not an illusion, because we do. But this is, in my opinion, the reason behind it. I hope this video was really informative for you. I'll be doing a lot more of numbers now. We're really going to crack into the ins and outs of the AFL season throughout the year. But there's the numbers. What do you guys think? You guys and girls, do you think that is pressure? Do you think it's something else? But how would you fix the pressure is my question. How would you get these numbers better? It's been a pleasure talking to you. Till next time, come out.